Hey everybody, Eric here from TOURNA-MIX, the ultimate mix competition website. I hope you're doing well. Today we're looking at some drums, and it's funny, I was going to do a full drum tutorial for you today on my drums from our bonus contest song. So this is, what's it called again here? It's called When Hearts Attack. Okay, this is our bonus song at TOURNA-MIX this month. And I was going to walk you through my drums, but the funniest thing happened when I came to do the tutorial. I listened back to my mix and I was like, wow, my drums suck. What's going on? So I mixed this about a month ago. And so, my ears have completely wandered to other things. I've mixed other songs. And when I came back to this one, I was like, there's something wrong with the snare drum. And I remembered when I first pulled up these tracks, here's the snare, by the way, this guy here. Okay, let me just zoom in a little bit on that. And you can see it's fairly dynamic. Now that's okay. This is actually the snare sample track we're looking at right now, and up here is the actual snare, and you can see it's fairly dynamic too. And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? But in this song, which is kind of a punk rock song, we'll have a listen in a sec. Really dynamic snares aren't necessarily our friend, especially if it's a sample. I find samples are terrible when they're dynamic because what we're seeing here is different velocities. So when this was triggered, when this sample was triggered off the main snare, I think it was done in a way that wasn't ideal. I think these should have been leveled out more because, if you've ever worked with samples, when you have a loud hit and then a small hit, they sound super different. Now, it's the same with organic snares, acoustic snares, but I find with samples, it just has that really weird effect of like one snare pops out like crazy and then the next one's completely gone. So when I listened back to my mix, my first instinct was, oh my God, the snare's out of phase. But it turns out it wasn't. It turns out it was this pesky sample track here that, here's a perfect example. A huge hit, really small hit. All right, so what did I do? Well, what I did right now is I just triggered a new sample. And here's trigger, okay? And most of you know what this plugin does, but it's important when you're doing your triggering to pay attention to this section here, and you have control over the velocities. You can sort of specify, do I want to tighten the sound and bring all the velocities kind of closer to each other, or maybe you want to push them further away and make it more dynamic. But in this case, I felt with this song, it wanted to be a tighter sound. Let me just print this snare for you. Okay, this is so if I were to take trigger off here, this is just an EQ I added, we'd be back to the original sound. Let me even take off the reverb. Here's what we were given. All right, and this is the new sample I've temporarily chosen. I might change it again, but here's the new sound. All right, so it is a pretty different sound. I think in a perfect world, I would have the exact sample that was given to me, but I don't, so I just picked a new one. But the point is I leveled out the sound more. So let me just print this track for you, and we'll take a look at the new waveform. Give me a sec. All right, we're back. So here's the original snare again. You can see it's fairly dynamic. And here's the new snare once I printed it. So we have now a visual on it. So you can see that the work that I did in trigger to control the velocities did tighten the sound. You can see much more of an even signal. Now I could have crushed this entirely and had it just be totally flatlined. I decided to leave it a little bit natural. But you know what? In a punk rock song, kind of a modern punk rock sound, sort of like Sum 41 maybe, there would probably be nothing wrong with literally crushing it and having every velocity be the same. It would just come down to personal taste. But anyway, this is a visual representation of what we have now. So yeah, this is a very important thing to, I'm just going to delete this guy, I don't need it. It's a very important thing to realize when you're given a trigger, given a sample that's been triggered, or you're triggering yourself, velocities are very important, and it's something you have to take a look at. So here's the song, just briefly. Let's take a quick listen.
Crash into the end, the blood has spilled a million times before, a shroud of lies still knocking at the door. It's time now, throw away.
All right, so that was the song. And before I continue, I want to point out something too. For those of you that are sort of thinking, well, we don't want to crush dynamics, don't we want to keep dynamics intact? Now, keep in mind that when you're doing this, the original snare, the acoustic snare, this guy, right? This guy is still dynamic, right? So it's, even if your sample was completely flatlined, this guy is still offering dynamics, right? Assuming that you're going to use it. I did choose to use it. If you were going to mute this entirely, then what I just said wouldn't apply. But usually you're not going to mute your overheads, right? These guys here. And the overheads are also dynamic. So the kind of natural expression of the drummer is going to be preserved even if you crush your sample, right? You can see big spikes here and peaks, and that's all good. But again, with samples, I personally find it really off-putting when you have those really hard, 127 sample hits, velocity hits, and then like an 80. They just sound like a completely different sample. And let's be honest, in like rock and metal and, punk and all that kind of stuff, like you need that even sound, right? You just need it. So where are we here? So yeah, so that was the tune. Let me see if I can find an example of where the original snare was really bugging me. Give me a sec. All right, I found a perfect example. So these two hits here, okay, when I play the clip here, just listen to how the sound changes. There's something about, especially this one, it sounds almost out of phase, even though there's going to be nothing else playing along with it here. It's going to be in solo, can't be out of phase. But it sort of sounds completely hollow on this hit. So here it is in solo. This is the original snare sample that was given to us. I'm going to keep the reverb on. Here we go. You hear that? There's a really, really big change right on this hit here. One more time. Let's hear that. All three of these hits here all have different sounds. Now, maybe it's just that they're slightly quieter, so my ear is hearing them different. But it almost sounds like a broken sample here. I don't know how else to say it. Let's hear it in the mix and see if we can hear it. Here we go. Yeah, you see this last one I heard perfectly, but these three here were just kind of gone. And, sure, hey, I could open up automation, right? And I could bump those three up. I mean, easy to do that. But again, we're raising the volume of something that was hit at a different velocity. So it's not the same thing. It doesn't work. Either way, it really bugged me. Let's solo up that snare again with the new snare. And let's hear if the tone changes now. Let's check this out. Here's the new snare. So interesting. It did actually change slightly on this one, and this was the loudest hit. So I could hear the velocity change there. I'm not too concerned though, because it still sounded like the same sample, but these three, they didn't sound weird at all, right? And again, if you remember when I printed the snare visually, you can see that why would they change? They were more or less hit at the same velocity, right? So that's the power of again, using this little section on trigger. Sometimes we use plugins for years and don't dig into the inner workings of them. But this little section here is important to play with, especially in certain genres. In a more like chill, folky genre, you might not want to touch this stuff. But for metal and all that kind of stuff, I'm pretty sure that, a pro metal guy would tell you that you don't want to have your samples be too dynamic. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I hear metal records and more aggressive genres. So there we go. Let me close that out here. Let's listen in the song now and hear this snare. Let's see if we can hear this louder hit as being problematic. Yeah, I don't know about you, but to me that sounded a lot better. I mean, a lot better. The untrained ear would think I'm nuts right now. Like, what are you even talking about? They both sound the same. But, if you've been mixing for a while, or even if you've just been mixing for a few months, I think there's a noticeable difference there. And, I've been doing this long enough that my ear is very sensitive to inconsistencies, in tuning and timing and in this case, in velocity. And I thought that was a lot better. So there you go. That's the little tutorial for today. So I'm not going to walk you through the drums because now I have to go remix them. I mean, they already sound pretty good, but I'm going to go and, play with them for the next 24 hours before we get to the full tutorial, which will be posted at TOURNA-MIX on the 20th or the 21st. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that. If you like mixing competitions and you haven't heard of us, come check us out, www.tourna-mix.com. The link will be in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a like. We'll see you soon.